My wife cheated with her boss, and now she's trying to steal my $300, $0 inheritance in our family home, a twist I never saw coming after she said she loved me. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to get like this, but here I am, sitting in my living room, staring at a pile of evidence that's tearing my world apart. It all started with a gut feeling. Something just felt off with Lisa, my wife. She'd been acting distant, snapping at me over small things, and her phone was glued to her hand more than usual. At first, I brushed it off, maybe work stress or some late nights. But then I noticed her hiding her texts, deleting messages, and lying about where she was going. Little things, but enough to prick my suspicion. It all came crashing down one night when I was cleaning up after dinner. I found her phone lying face down on the coffee table. Out of habit, I picked it up and unlocked it. I didn't mean to snoop, I swear, but the messages that popped up made my stomach turn. There were texts from her boss, Mark, that were way too intimate. Flirty, suggestive, talking about meeting up after hours, for work, but clearly not about work at all. And the way they talked about each other, like they shared some secret code, made my blood boil. I'd known Lisa for almost 10 years. She'd always been the kind of woman who said she loved me, who claimed I was her everything. But there she was, sneaking around, lying. I saw the text where she told him how she was so bored with her life and needed some excitement, and he responded with plans to meet up to make her forget everything. I couldn't believe it. My wife, my partner, was cheating on me with her boss. The man she worked for, a guy named Mark, who's 10 years younger and always seemed a little too charming. After I saw that, I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd just uncovered. I felt sick, betrayed, humiliated. How long had this been going on? Did she ever love me? Or was I just some placeholder while she played her little game? I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't ready. Yet I needed to gather my thoughts, figure out what I was going to say, how I was going to handle this disaster. The next morning, I sat her down in the kitchen. She looked at me with that innocent, bitchy smile that I'd come to recognize as her way of hiding the truth. "Lisa, I know about Mark," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. Her face froze for a second, then she laughed it off, saying, "Oh, come on, that's just work talk. You're overreacting." But I was. I'd seen enough to know that the woman I loved and trusted had been lying to my face for months. She tried to deny it, of course, said I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. She even had the nerve to say I was insecure, that I didn't trust her, but I wasn't stupid. I knew what I saw, and I knew what it meant. She was cheating on me, and she didn't even bother to hide it anymore. I felt a mix of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief all at once. How could she do this? How could she betray me after everything we'd been through? I thought about the vows we made, the promises, the life we built. And then I realized I was going to do something about it. But I didn't just want to yell or throw her out. No, I needed to be strategic. Because Lisa wasn't just some random cheater, she was manipulative, bitchy, and she had plans of her own. I figured she might try to spin this around, deny everything, maybe even steal from me if she thought she could get away with it. That's when I decided I couldn't trust her anymore. I had to protect what was mine, my inheritance, our family home, everything I'd worked so hard for. The next few days were a whirlwind. I started digging into her bank accounts, her phone, her emails. I found out she'd been talking to Mark about me, about getting rid of the problem, as she called it. She'd even made plans to move out, to take a chunk of my inheritance, which I knew was in my name, but she was scheming to get her hands on it. She's always been good at lying, twisting things in her favor, but I was ready. I couldn't just sit back and let her walk all over me. I needed a plan, and I needed to make sure she didn't get away with any of it. So I started to play it cool, acting like I didn't know anything. Meanwhile, I was gathering evidence, talking to a lawyer, and preparing myself for what was coming, because I knew this wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about her trying to steal my money, my home, everything I'd built. And if she thought she could do that without consequences, she was dead wrong. I was done being the naive husband. This was war, and I was ready to fight for what's mine. After a few days of pretending everything was normal, I knew I had to confront her again, this time with a plan in mind. I wanted to catch her in the act if I could, show her I wasn't going to be played anymore. I also needed to make sure I had all the evidence I'd gathered so I could put an end to her schemes once and for all. Lisa, of course, was still acting like she was the victim. She threw fits, yelled about how I was attacking her, calling me paranoid and jealous. She told me I was imagining things, that Mark was just a friend, and that I was crazy for even suspecting her. Her words felt like knives in my gut. She was so good at lying, so bitchy and manipulative, that I almost believed her for a second. But I knew better. I saw through her bullshit now. One evening, I decided to follow her. She told me she was heading out to meet a friend for drinks. I played it cool, but I kept my distance. I followed her to a fancy hotel downtown. When I peeked inside, I saw her in a suite with Mark. They were clearly more than just friends. They were kissing, touching, and she looked like she was in ecstasy. I felt my stomach drop, my fists clench. That was it. I had enough. I snapped some photos with my phone, then quietly slipped away before they saw me. I knew I had to act fast. I went straight to my lawyer the next morning. We devised a plan to confront Lisa with the evidence, but more importantly, to protect my assets. I told him I suspected she was planning to take a chunk of my inheritance, and he advised me to get a prenup-style agreement, just in case she was trying to manipulate her way into my estate. Meanwhile, I started to think about my next move. I couldn't just confront her outright and hope she'd come clean. No, I needed leverage. I decided to set a trap. I told her I was going out of town for a business trip, but in reality, I stayed close. I left her a fake letter, supposedly from her boss Mark, asking her to meet him again. I wanted to see what she'd do if she thought I was really gone. Sure enough, she took the bait. She got all dressed up again and left the house, heading straight to that hotel. I kept my eyes on her from a safe distance, watching her slip into Mark's room. That was the moment I knew I had her. She was planning to meet him, to continue her affair, and to finalize her plans to steal from me. When she returned home late that night, I was waiting for her in the living room. She looked surprised, then irritated. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I knew everything. I showed her the photos, the evidence, the texts. Her face turned white, then red with rage. She tried to deny it, to spin some story about how I was crazy, but I laid it all out: her lies, her cheating, her plans to take my inheritance. Her bitchy attitude turned into full-blown anger. She yelled at me, calling me paranoid, saying I was ruining our marriage. She accused me of spying on her, of being insecure. But I wasn't backing down anymore. I told her if she tried to steal my money or leave with it, I'd make sure she'd regret it. I'd take her to court, get a restraining order, and make sure she never saw a penny of my inheritance. That confrontation was intense. She kept crying, saying she loved me, that she was only under stress, that Mark was just a distraction. But I knew better. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I'd fought for her, for us, and now I was fighting to save what was left of my life. I felt betrayed, furious, and exhausted. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I was done being naive. The next morning, I moved some of my most important documents to a safe deposit box, just in case she tried to steal or forge anything. I also started planning how to protect my estate legally. I'd been generous to her over the years, but now I saw her true colors. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything I'd worked so hard for. As I sat in my empty house that night, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could keep fighting or I could walk away. But I knew one thing: I wouldn't be again. I'd learned my lesson the hard way. I'd trusted her, loved her, and she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. Now, I had to figure out what my next step was, how to rebuild from this mess, and most importantly, how to move on without letting her destroy what I still had left. After that night, I knew I couldn't just sit around waiting for her next move. Lisa was unpredictable, and her bitchy attitude only made her more dangerous when cornered. I started to take more serious steps to protect myself and my assets. I contacted a lawyer I trusted, a guy who specialized in inheritance and divorce cases. We discussed my options, and he advised me to get a court order to freeze any joint accounts and to prepare for the possibility of a legal battle over the estate. In the meantime, I also hired a private investigator. I needed to know if Lisa was planning anything else. Turns out, I wasn't the only one suspicious. The pie uncovered that she'd been secretly meeting with her boss, Mark, more than just a few times. They'd been planning to set up some kind of scheme to claim part of my inheritance, maybe even forge documents or manipulate the estate papers. I was furious. The woman I'd loved and trusted was scheming behind my back, trying to steal everything from under my nose. I kept my cool, though. I knew I had to be strategic. I didn't want to give her any reason to accuse me of harassment or manipulation. Instead, I kept collecting evidence, building my case quietly. I also started to look into what she might do next. I suspected she'd try to turn the tables, maybe accuse me of abuse or threaten to take the kids if we had any, which we didn't yet. I had to be ready for anything. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her bitchy act, throwing fits, trying to guilt-trip me and insisting she loved me. She'd cry, say I was the one hurting her, and accuse me of spying on her out of jealousy. I just looked at her and thought, you're full of shit. She was so good at lying, twisting everything around. She'd tell her friends I was controlling, jealous, and unreasonable, but I knew the truth. She was the one cheating, scheming, and trying to steal my money. One day, she got particularly nasty. She accused me of ruining her life, of being paranoid, and said she'd leave me if I kept spying on her. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I told her flat out that if she kept up her lies and schemes, I'd take her to court. I was done playing nice. I was going to protect what was mine and make sure she didn't get away with it. I also started to look into the family home. That's where she was planning to move her stuff, I was sure of it. I didn't want her to just take over the house, especially not with my inheritance. I talked to my lawyer about a restraining order, and he said it was possible if I could prove she was planning to steal from me or threaten my safety. I didn't want to go that far, but I was prepared to do whatever it took. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. In the midst of all this chaos, I also had to manage my own feelings. I was angry, hurt, and disappointed. I'd always thought Lisa loved me, that we had a real future. But now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, lying, bitchy woman who was willing to ruin everything for her own gain. I felt betrayed in every possible way. Trust was shattered. I wondered how I'd ever look at her the same way again, but I also knew I had to stay focused. I couldn't let her get away with this. I started to detach emotionally, telling myself I was better off without her. I had my inheritance, my house, my life. I just needed to protect it. I also started to think about what I wanted from all this mess. Did I want to save the marriage? No, not anymore. Did I want revenge? In a way, yes. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done. And I wanted to make sure she never tried to do this again to anyone else. It was a dark time. Every day felt like walking on thin ice. I kept wondering what her next move would be, or if she'd just give up and try to run away with some of my money. I had to stay one step ahead. I began secretly changing the passwords on all our shared accounts, setting up alerts, and even talking to a financial advisor about how to protect my estate from her schemes. I knew she was cunning, and I couldn't afford to let her win. The biggest shock was yet to come. One afternoon, I found out she had been secretly talking to a lawyer, an old friend of hers, about how to claim her rights to the house and the inheritance. She'd even been trying to forge some documents to make it look like she had a legal claim. I was furious. I knew I had to act fast or I'd lose everything. I contacted my lawyer again and we started preparing for a fight. I wasn't going down without a fight, not after everything I'd been through. That's when I realized something. I'd loved her. I'd believed in us. But I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone who only cared about herself and her schemes. I had to face the fact that I was better off without her. But I also knew I had to be smart. I had to protect myself, my home, my money, and my future. I was in a war and I wasn't going to back down. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Lisa wasn't just cheating. She was actively trying to steal from me. I had to get ahead of her plans before she managed to pull off something irreversible. I started working closely with my lawyer, pushing for a legal injunction to freeze her access to the house and any joint accounts. I also hired a forensic accountant to dig into her financial records, anything that could show her scheming or unauthorized transactions. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior grew even more bitchy and confrontational. She'd lash out at me, accusing me of everything under the sun: jealousy, controlling behavior, paranoia. She accused me of inventing stories, of trying to ruin her reputation. Honestly, I was starting to see her for what she was: a manipulative woman who'd do anything to get her way. She'd lie with a smile, deny everything, then turn around and lie again. It was exhausting, but I knew I had to stay calm and collected. One day, I caught her trying to access the safe deposit box where I kept my most important documents: proof of ownership, estate plans, and some sensitive financial info. I'd already changed the passwords, but I found out she'd somehow gotten her hands on the new code. I was furious. I realized she was getting desperate, willing to do anything to get her hands on my money. That's when I decided I needed to tighten security even more. I set up a surveillance system around the house, just in case she tried to sneak in again. At the same time, I moved some of the most valuable assets into a new account in my name only. I also started to prepare a detailed timeline of her scheming, compiling all the evidence I'd collected: texts, emails, photos, witness statements from the pie. I knew I'd need this if it came to court. I wasn't going to let her gaslight her way out of this. I wanted her to face the consequences of her lies and greed. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, more than I'd ever felt before. I'd always thought Lisa loved me, that we had a future. But now I saw her for what she truly was: a manipulative, bitchy woman who'd betray her own vows for a quick score. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I let her get so close, only to be like this. It hurt more than I can say, but I also knew I had to move forward. I had to protect what was mine and let go of the woman who'd turned into a stranger. One night I was sitting alone in the living room, going over everything I'd uncovered, when I realized that Lisa's plans might go even further. I got a call from my lawyer. She'd been talking to a solicitor about signing some estate documents that would give her a stake in the house and my inheritance. I knew she was trying to forge her way into my life, into my estate, by any means necessary. That's when I made a decision. I would fight her legally, fight her dirty if I had to. No more Mr. Nice Guy. I was done being played. I started to prepare for a showdown. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer to discuss filing for a protective order. I also contacted a private investigator again to keep tabs on her movements. I didn't trust her not to do something drastic. I also started documenting every interaction, every lie, every suspicious move she made. I knew she'd try to spin everything in her favor, she always did, but I was ready to show the truth. Meanwhile, Lisa's attitude became even more hostile. She'd scream at me, call me paranoid, accuse me of trying to control her. She'd threatened to take me to court, to ruin me financially if I didn't back off. But I wasn't backing down. I knew what she was up to, and I was determined to stop her. I'd been betrayed enough. The trust was gone, and I was starting to see her for what she was: a selfish, manipulative woman who'd burn everything down for her own gain. The worst part was feeling so powerless. I'd loved her once, believed in us. But now I felt like I was fighting a ghost. Every step I took, I had to be careful. I knew she'd lie, cheat, and manipulate her way out of anything if she thought she could. I had to be smarter, stronger, and more prepared than ever. I couldn't let her steal my house, my inheritance, my peace of mind. That's when I realized I had to go all in. No more playing nice. No more trusting blindly. I started to think about what my future looked like without her. I'd always envisioned us building a life together, but now I saw that she was only interested in her own greed. I needed to focus on myself, protecting what was left, securing my estate, and maybe even starting over. It's crazy how someone you trust can turn into your biggest threat overnight. I had no choice but to fight for what was rightfully mine, even if it meant losing her entirely. As I sat there contemplating everything, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that I'd caught her, that I was taking steps to protect myself. Dread because I knew the battle wasn't over yet and she'd fight dirty. But I was ready. I wasn't going down without a fight. I'd learned the hard way that love can turn into betrayal in the blink of an eye, and now I was doing everything I could to make sure she paid for it. The legal preparations kept me busy, but what really pushed everything into high gear was when Lisa started making her move. She was getting more aggressive, more bitchy, and her lies were getting more elaborate. She accused me of everything, controlling, paranoid, unfaithful, and tried to turn the friends and family against me. But I had the evidence now, and I wasn't about to let her gaslight me into submission. My lawyer told me to be ready for her to try some kind of outrageous move, maybe even try to claim the house through some legal loophole or forged documents. One afternoon, I came home to find her packing her bags. She was furious, yelling that she was leaving because I was crazy and controlling. She claimed she was going to take her share of the inheritance and run, even if it meant burning everything down. She looked at me with that bitchy sneer and said she didn't care about the house or the money anymore, that she'd just leave and start fresh, without me. I looked at her coldly, knowing she was bluffing. She thought her threats would scare me, but I knew better. I'd already made sure she couldn't just walk away with my estate. I blocked her from taking anything of real value, changed the locks, and made sure all my important documents were secured. I also contacted the bank to freeze any joint accounts. I'd been planning for this moment, and I wasn't going to let her steal what was mine. I called my lawyer again, and we quickly filed for a court order to prevent her from leaving with any assets or selling the house. I could see her frustration and bitchy attitude bubbling over, but I stayed calm. My main goal was to stop her from executing any of her schemes. While all this was happening, I kept digging into her phone and emails, trying to find any last-minute tricks she might have up her sleeve. Turns out, she'd been talking to some shady contacts, people who specialize in shady estate transfers and forged documents. I also discovered she'd been secretly meeting with a lawyer she knew from her past, trying to get her hands on a power of attorney, something that could give her control over my assets without my knowledge. That was the last straw. I knew I had to act fast. The court hearing was scheduled within days. I was nervous, but I knew I had the evidence to back me up. My lawyer laid out everything: the texts, the emails, the witness statements, the PI reports. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that she was entitled to her fair share, but it was clear she was trying to manipulate her way into my estate. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning. When the decision finally came, it was in my favor. The court issued a restraining order against Lisa, barring her from entering the house or accessing any of my money or property. That was a huge victory, but it didn't stop her from being bitchy and manipulative. She called me names, accused me of ruining her life, and threatened me with all kinds of legal actions if I didn't give her what she wanted. But I was done playing her game. I'd fought for my rights, and I had the proof to back it up. I started moving forward, making plans to finalize the legal separation. I knew this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and dignity. In the aftermath of the court ruling, I felt a strange sense of relief, but also exhaustion. I'd been through so much: betrayal, lies, manipulation, and I'd come out the other side battered but stronger. I realized I should have seen the signs earlier, but I was blinded by love. Now I saw the truth. Lisa was a manipulative, greedy woman who only cared about herself. I understood I had to cut her out completely if I wanted to move on. I spent the next few weeks tying up loose ends, selling off some of her belongings, transferring my assets into new accounts, and making sure everything was legally protected. I also started seeing a counselor to process everything I'd been through. The betrayal cut deep, but I knew I had to heal and rebuild. I'd lost my trust in her, but not in myself. Looking back, I realized how close I was to losing everything: my home, my inheritance, my peace of mind. Lisa's scheming almost succeeded, but I fought back and I won. The biggest lesson I learned is that you can't trust blindly, especially when someone shows signs of manipulation and greed. Be vigilant, protect yourself, and never let anyone take what's yours without a fight. I'm not perfect, but I'm stronger now. And I know no matter how bad it gets, I can survive this. The whole ordeal changed me in ways I never expected. I used to think love was enough: trust, honesty, loyalty. But now I know better. Lisa's betrayal cut so deep that I almost lost myself in the process. Still, I'm grateful I managed to come out the other side with what I have left: my house, my inheritance, my sanity. It's not just about the money anymore. It's about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my peace of mind. Looking back, I see all the warning signs I ignored, the little lies, the secretive behavior, her bitchy attitude when confronted. I was blinded by the good times, the promises of forever. But she was only pretending, hiding her greed behind a mask of love. That realization was brutal but necessary. It pushed me to finally see her for what she really was: a manipulative, selfish woman who'd do anything to get her way, even if it meant destroying everything we built together. I learned that trust is fragile. It can be shattered in an instant by someone you once believed in. That's why I started to take control early, gathering evidence, protecting my assets, and staying one step ahead. It's a hard lesson, one I wish I didn't have to learn the hard way, but it's made me stronger. I now know that safeguarding what's yours is not just about money. It's about your future, your peace, and your mental health. The most important thing I want anyone reading this to take away is this: don't ignore the red flags. If your gut tells you something's wrong, listen to it. Don't wait until it's too late. Trust is earned, not blindly given. And if someone shows signs of manipulation, greed, or deceit, protect yourself. Be vigilant, be prepared, and don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. As for Lisa, she's gone now. She tried to come back a few times, but I shut her out. I've cut all ties. I realize now that some people are only good for one thing: teaching you what you don't want in your life. I may have lost a wife, but I gained clarity. I gained strength. And I gained a future that's finally free of her lies and schemes. At the end of the day, I've learned that betrayal can be devastating, but it also reveals who you really are. I'm proud that I stood my ground, protected my inheritance, and didn't let her steal my peace. I still have scars, sure, but they're reminders of how far I've come. And I know that no matter what happens next, I'm better off without her. I've learned to trust myself again, and that's the most valuable lesson I could ask for.